Hello, and welcome to UT Health San Antonio Staff Advisory Council's Seeds of Success podcast, the show that profiles leadership and peers here at UT Health. I'm your host, Pete Arguello, and today we're going to talk about personal success stories, growth, and everything we do to make lives better. I'm joined today by Dr. Kathryn Keeton, Vice President and Chief of Staff for the Office of the President. Dr. Keeton, thanks for joining us today. It's truly been a pleasure working with you thus far. From my personal standpoint, we're very excited to have you here joining us and giving our listeners a taste of what it is you do in your day-to-day, and how the Office of the President and, well, in this case as well, the now Office of the Senior Executive Vice President for Health Affairs and Health System, juggling both of those, but obviously all within the realm of the Office of the President, kind of giving us some insight as to what you do within that space and how, again, all of this contributes to the overall mission here at UT Health San Antonio.
Thank you, Pete. I really appreciate the invitation, and it's a privilege to be here. I, too, have enjoyed now almost 2 years here and getting the chance to work with you very often, as well as the Office of Government Relations and, of course, working closely with the Staff Advisory Council. I just love that they're doing this, and it was a privilege to be invited. So thank you very much.
Great. Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and just dive right in. With that said, to my earlier point, sharing with our listeners what it is you do here at UT Health San Antonio, through the Office of the President within your 2 years here. I know a lot's kind of course, evolved over the last couple of years. But yeah, we would love to just hear about the kind of the daily operations, but as well your personal experience just here at UT Health and your position as Chief of Staff, what you do here, and
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So as many know, I joined in July of 23, and that was at the exit and retirement of Mary DeLay, which obviously those were very big shoes to fill. And when I came in, especially for the Office of the President at that time under Dr. Henrich, it was really an opportunity to step in a role that was not only supporting him around his strategic initiatives and the daily operation of managing the team for the Office of the President, but also really working closely and collaborating with the vice presidents, cultivating those relationships to really propel Dr. Henrich's, as we know, beautiful and bold vision forward. From the clinical enterprise, but also from our education missions and our research mission. And another big piece of the Office of the President at that time and now is around community engagement. So whether that's partnerships or specific community engagement opportunities around sponsoring or coming up with different ways that we can engage in the community through support and service, that is something that was very much a part of the role when I first stepped in and has continued to grow over these past couple of years. But to your point, there's been a lot of change. So we've transitioned, and I'm sure you have questions around that I'm happy to answer as well.
Well, certainly before diving into to the overall practice of I guess now diving into how you got here, because that's kind of my next question is your leadership development, giving advice to others, et cetera. But before we move down that path, I think just in your time being here for the last 2 years and kind of where you came from, I think your story is obviously very special. It's very unique because you, having come from UTSA prior to UT Health San Antonio, and with the upcoming integration to make the university this major centerpiece, not only now for South Texas, but for the entire state and the nation, it's obviously a full circle moment. So, it'd be great to just kind of hear and gain some further insight into your background with the academic university before, and then now having moved into this health-related space, and then doing that whole 360 almost.
Yeah. I love that, and I feel very much kind of a full circle moment, especially when the integration was announced of the merger of UTSA and, of course, UT Health San Antonio. And you're right. It has, in reflection, there are a lot of interesting alignment that I can see from both institutions, especially from my different experiences. My background, I'm an organizational psychologist. So when I first came to San Antonio, I had been working at NASA as a contractor for about 8.5 years. We moved, my family and I, here to San Antonio, and so I was doing some consulting work. But then I started actually as an adjunct professor at UTSA in the College of Business. And over the 8 years that I was there, I moved from an adjunct professor to a non-tenured track professor. to an associate director of executive education in the College of Business in what was called the Center for Professional Excellence. So it moved from undergraduate students to graduate students, and then ultimately I became the senior executive director of that center. And that center oversaw the executive MBA, which interestingly we had a partnership with UT Health San Antonio, something that actually Dean Romas spearheaded and established a healthcare track for that EMBA. Wow. And sponsored 5 students, so on this side 5 physicians every single year. In addition, also a very healthcare-focused leadership program that he also spearheaded and partnered with us at the time, called the Executive Development Program. So in the last 4 or 5 years that I was at UTSA, I was getting this amazing opportunity to not only meet, but work with and teach and learn from these amazing physicians and executive leadership that were going through these programs. But to your point, it was the experience at UTSA, seeing all of the different facets of being a professor and engaging with that student body and seeing the tremendous change that under President Amy's leadership happened in those 8 years, and then having this opportunity to step into a role of supporting our beloved Dr. Henrich in a role that I had not done before. And so it was a very different paradigm, essentially stepping into, where it was also learning a completely different higher education institution, and to understand the clinical enterprise and the different missions across education and research and clinical, and seeing how those tie. So to your point, it's been this interesting thread of always being continuing to be in a position of learning and teaching, and then trying to take those skills in a meaningful way to help support an amazing leader. And now having the opportunity to serve President Amy, another amazing leader, as we think about this integrated institution, it really is a full circle moment in a lot of ways.
How amazing that just to hear, about the of course, having been given that insight now in terms of the previous work, in terms of the partnership between, our School of Medicine and the business school. That's at UTSA, exactly right. As an example. Of course, we all know that this was the perfect timing, a long time coming. But, this is, with all that said, I think it's, you're in a perfect position. I think the universe has just brought, what was needed in terms of your of course, the skill set, and now it's kind of going into this joint university. That's truly amazing. Congratulations on all the success and of course everything that we have to come as the now UT San Antonio come September. But
I appreciate that, and I think you're right, especially around the synergies. If I could just say quickly, that example of the partnership that you just spoke of, and that was such an important and integral part of the College of Business, especially as we were trying to grow executive education. That partnership helped create synergies across UTSA and UT Health San Antonio. And it's those kind of synergies that I see as potential, and I know senior leadership across both institutions see those possibilities and are prioritizing those so that we can continue to see not only amazing growth, but excellence to our future UT San Antonio.
Absolutely. No, I think, yes, great vision, great visionaries behind a lot of this, and we're certainly excited. Now, having spoken about your background in leadership and professional development, those roles as, of course, as a psychologist and a lot in between, I think we wanted to gain a deeper sense of, kind of your leadership background and what the best advice has been that you've received, and how did it impact your career in terms of leadership and just all that skill that you bring to the table.
I appreciate that, Pete. Yeah, I love this question, and you'll find probably through this interview, I love quotes. So this one was some advice that somebody gave me, but it's a specific quote, and it's actually by Aristotle. So I'm going to read it if I can here. Excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, but rather have those because we have acted rightly. We are what we repeatedly do. And so when you had this question asking about leadership advice, to me, it's a perfect example of leadership is actually molded in the drudgery of small efforts and acts that one carries out every single day. You wanting to be a leader it's in the consistency in how you show up and how you care for others and how you put yourself in front of what's coming, how you make sure things get done, how you challenge yourself to do better. And so I love that quote as a reminder of leadership is in those small acts and how that develops and shapes a person over time. And I love to think of all the amazing leaders here at UT Health San Antonio that are beautiful examples of that they're willing to do the hard work, and that's what defines them as good leaders.
That's amazing. And I think that really falls into, and of course I'm being UT Health Public University specific in this case, and not to say that it's these are the only examples that can happen, but I think there's just a servant leader type energy that surrounds almost all of us, of course, and I think that really plays into the leadership styles at this institution, and of course at UTSA, where we see these public servants, considering ourselves to be so, and then taking just what's at the heart of our public service into these leadership positions, and not to necessarily say that leadership is only when you oversee a team, but I think developing, ourselves as models, whether it's to oversee teams in our careers or not, it's just great to take these steps on and to your point, make sure that we have. I don't want to say these habits, the term habits, it can be used interchangeably, mm-hmm. But these small steps to your point. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that when you talk about the service mission, I think I got exposure to that in the role that I had at UTSA, especially seeing that from all of these UT Health physicians and senior leaders, and the mission focus, I think, is absolutely something special and something that really attracted to me in this role in the first place. So when you speak of that, yes, I think it is something that is special and is sacred here at UT Health, and I know will continue to shape and define what that integrated institution is, and that is because the people of this organization, to your point, are beholden to that mission, and that is an example of those small acts that I was speaking of in that quote.
Yes, absolutely. Well, to piggyback on the people that you've mentioned, I know that we all have these broad spectrum of folks who have, been influences within our professional and personal development. Going a little bit further into that piece, maybe giving us some insight into the most important or the most influential person during the early stages of your career.
Yeah.
Maybe highlighting somebody in particular or a group of people that may have shaped your leadership approach and kind of, has gotten you to these points where you are today.
Yeah, I appreciate that question as well. I think for me, a very formidable point in my career was when I first started at NASA as a contractor there. And there were a few people that really stuck out, and I was thinking about how that shaped specifically my perspective on leadership. The first person his name is Jeff Davis, and so I'm going to introduce the individual and kind of my connection with them, but then just share specifically what I learned from that person. Jeff at the time was director of the Human Health and Performance Directorate at Johnson Space Center in Houston, which meant he was over about 3,000 people. And he oversaw any of the human performance element of astronauts and flight controllers successfully completing missions in space, whether that's the International Space Station or another designed mission. And meeting him and getting the opportunity to work with him, I was so impressed by his interest and ability to surround himself by smart and capable people. And he wasn't threatened by that. He actually thrived on that, and he didn't see levels of making those opportunities, and pushed those individuals and essentially just turned them loose. So it was the first time, especially at an impressionable part of my career, to see a leader of that magnitude and at that level, willingness to do that and consistency in doing that. And it had such benefits for the directorate, not only in the innovations and the productivity, but also the creativity and the desire to be there and the satisfaction in those individuals that he worked with in terms of their their work and their focus. So that was like that was a very important lesson for me to know that good leadership is actually about surrounding yourself by good people and not being threatened by them being smarter or more capable. Like that's actually something to want to enhance and to be able to utilize. Like that only makes you as the leader better. And also at that time, I met an individual who's continued to be my mentor. His name is Colonel Casey Haskins. And he is a retired Army officer now, but at the time, he was an instructor at West Point. He had been a service general for over 30 years. And he was invited as a guest at some NASA event. And he, gave this presentation that continued, and this is just who he is, to show that if we look at problems from a different perspective, we will always find different solutions. And NASA prides themselves at being able to do this, but it was so interesting to be exposed to a different way of thinking. And so that's another, at that time, I continually go back to him as an individual to learn from, even now, about when I think there's a problem and I'm coming at it a specific way, to be reminded that actually there's always an opportunity to think of something from a different perspective, a third solution. How can I think about this situation differently? So that has been, again, in the context of a leadership approach, something that I think is very impressionable to me, something I always try to instill in the way that I show up and that I'm leading or how I see others lead. I think that is such an important part. So those are two examples.
Wow, that's amazing. That made me think of so many things just by hearing.
Oh, please.
Yeah. First off, before I forget.
Yes.
Yes, to your point about looking at things from different perspectives, I've always, taken that term, if you will, two sides of the coin, or there are two sides to a story. It's almost like there are more than two sides. There are so many different perspectives that different folks can bring to the table. And then also just using that and then piggybacking on Mr. Davis's approach to not being threatened by, different folks who bring so much to the table. That resonates with me quite a bit. I think in my own, personal development, whether it's, personally or professionally, I've always wanted to make sure that I'm always going to be a student of something, even if I oversee a team, even if I bring individuals on. There's always going to be somebody who, I don't ever want to use the term, is going to be smarter or whatever the case may be. It's just that everybody brings so much to a team and can contribute in so many different ways that why limit that? And adding on to what you were talking about in terms of the overall morale of a team, it sparks creativity. It makes them want to stay where they are. It promotes longevity. There's so many domino effects that just come out positively when you have leaders like that. So I really much appreciate those two great examples. But yeah.
And just one additional, even as you were talking through your reflections, it makes me think too that I hadn't thought about this before, but the two examples I just gave are actually supported by evidence-based research in the team literature and the leadership literature. So it's not surprising that leaders that show up that way are not only going to foster amazing teams, but they're going to reach and probably in most cases surpass their goals. Like they're going to outperform, especially teams that aren't treated and led and supported in that same way. So we even know from the evidence, from the literature base, from a research perspective, that that's also true. And it also doesn't pass me that I've seen that kind of leadership at UTSA and at UT Health San Antonio. Like my career choices have continually tried to put myself in an environment where that is, that I learned from that earlier stage in life.
It's almost like you answered my next question, which is great. But diving more into that, I guess taking all of that now to your point about evidence-based approaches, how it makes teams feel, how it's affected your personal and professional development. Asking now what the most important leadership lesson is that you've learned, and how has it proven to be invaluable for you?
It's a really hard question, first of all, the most important leadership lesson. So probably not surprising, I already gave one quote. So as I was reflecting on this question, I love this quote. I think it is actually by F. Scott Fitzgerald, but in any case, it's the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. So I love that quote because especially in the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years, and the type of opportunities that I have had to navigate, especially in the positions that I've been in, has continually put me in environments where things are true. Both things can be true. Something can be right, but really hard to do. Something can be unfair, but also the most fair. Something can be very challenging, but also simple and elegant. And continually having to be able to, as an individual, know those two things and hold the line as we move through something. That is, when I think of this job, especially Pete, these last 2 years, I should say, that has been the lesson. That these decisions, these things that are happening when you're caring for an institution, you're caring for 8,000 employees, you're caring for the vision that an amazing leader is pushing forward, you're going to be put in situations that are really challenging. And the outcomes aren't going to be simple and easy. They're going to be difficult. And they're going to have these two things where you can have these polar opposites of, wow, this is really unfair and also fair, or kind and seemingly difficult and challenging for others in those situations. And being able to hold the line and know that that's still okay as a person and an individual and as a leader is really important.
Wow. It's so amazing, and it resonates on so many different fronts. I've actually not heard that quote before, but I'm a person of, when I see a great piece of writing or a quote or even a meme, I guess it's my generation now.
There we go.
But seeing that and really having it just, again, resonate on so many levels. Having these two opposing viewpoints, if you will, operating with that, because kind of putting my government relations hat on for a second, you see it in so many different areas, right? You see it in lawmaking, you see it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, you see it in so many different areas of our lives that I think when we view things from that lens, just making sure that something may be for lack of a better word, uncomfortable on one end and may make sense on another from a different viewpoint, bringing that together. That's why I've taken the position of making sure that I view things from a lens where there's so much gray area that not everything is black and white, and not everything has to be black or white. There's a full spectrum of possibilities. And I think taking that into a personal leadership role, I think it's so fascinating. And I think that's now probably a quote that I'm going to make a copy of and have in my office, because it's really cool to always remember that. So
I'm glad. Yeah. I think it's true, especially even when we expand the scope of beyond professional and our personal, and we think of our world and all of the things that are happening. I think our ability to function knowing those two opposites, those two things at the black and white spectrum that you delineated, no, there's actually a lot of gray, and your ability as a person and as a leader to function well and effectively in that space is actually critical.
Wow, that so fascinating. And I think, and again, this is just perfectly leading into where we're taking the conversation now. Having a lot of influences, whether they're through literature or and again, I know a lot of us are tied into a lot of social media or different speakers or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody has levels of influence that positively help them, whether it's through written literature or TED Talks or whatever the case may be. But taking that on and wanting to know now, kind of picking your brain further, what books or resources have had the greatest impact on your leadership journey. And again, we definitely want to hone in on resources, because it doesn't have to just be books, right? It can be a lot of different areas that we get our information from. So definitely would love to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point too, the idea of just you had said earlier that you are a learner, right? So always being in a position where we're continuing to expand our own understanding and education, I think, is so important. And And so I'm gonna probably answer that from like a more professional focus, but I think actually it's really good for people to have, a good list of authors and people that they love to listen to, whether that's a podcast or some kind of social media, et cetera, across a range of topics and subjects, et cetera. But I think for me right now, when I think of, especially as an organizational psychologist, one individual, his name is Adam Grant. For those that are interested in kind of org psych and just or org development or change management and trying to understand teams and leaders, but having that translated into a medium that's a little more digestible. Not so. The significance level was 0.05 at the P value.
Ooh, over my head.
Exactly. Adam Grant has done a great job. He has a strong podcast. He's written quite a few books that are around taking organizational psych principles and applying them in organizational settings. He has quite a few really good books. So I would strongly recommend him. Even you said earlier on the mediums, I love podcasts like Hidden Brain or Freakonomics, and just trying to think about our world and understand it from a different viewpoint that's outside of the scope of general academic institutions and what my usual reading is on. But when you would pose the question around greatest impact, so I'm going to dive just a little bit deeper. There's one book that I really love, and actually I used to teach this in part of a course for the Executive MBA. It's called Atomic Habits. We used to have it earlier.
Yes.
It's by James Cleary, and he postures that we should be utilizing habits so that we can reach our goals. Like, I don't know how many thousands of books are out there like that. But one concept that he dives deep in on and is the reason I love this book so much is around cognitive capacity. And so he makes the argument that the reason actually that you want to have habits in the way that you behave and the way that you go about achieving your goals is about achieving the goals in and of themselves, but also the more things that you have that are habitual in your life, what you're actually reducing from a cognitive level is reducing the load so that you can free up your cognitive capacity for other things that are like more interesting, important, and creative, etc. So like his silly examples, if I have to decide every morning if I really am going to get up on that first alarm or second alarm or third alarm, if I have to make a decision about when I'm eating my breakfast or when I'm brushing my teeth, right? And he's giving silly examples in an easy space. All of that is taking cognitive capacity. I actually have to spend mental effort of making those decisions. But if all those decisions are habitual and I'm just making them, I've actually freed up all of that mind space, all of that mind energy on silly decisions that I can actually then contribute and push to other things that really matter about my day, whether it's solving a difficult problem or having more time in a creative space, and it's about freeing that mental load. And they've done all these beautiful studies to support this idea and concept of cognitive capacity. So when I think about like even my work day, right? Like how much time am I spending on email or the way in which I respond, or a decision about something that's habitual that comes through every day? Is there ways that I can automate even the way I approach that work so that I don't have to do as much mental load to free up that space for something else that might be more important? Anyway.
No, that and this could be in a completely different podcast, but again, so many questions popped up. I think, and somebody who's perceived habits, the term habits or the practice of habits having a negative connotation to them, not really seeing it from a deeper perspective, from, a more psychological perspective. We think a lot, and I know that there are a lot of negative habits out there that people, take on, unfortunately. But to your point, knowing that if we can kind of find that balance, right, to be aware, to be cognizant of the day-to-day, the mundane tasks, if you will, making sure that those are kind of on autopilot.
Yes.
While we, open up for creative space, it's really cool to think about. And again, I could pick your brain again all day on well, how do we even balance, somewhat of the, some of the negative habits. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up because, that's a huge part of the book too. Because then you have to undo those same things if they're not serving you, right? When we even say, oh, that's a bad habit, well, how are we defining that? It's probably not serving you in some very specific way. Yeah. And so it's utilizing those same steps that he delineates in the book, but unwinding them so that you're actually breaking those habits.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Someone like me who is a little tough for me to actually finish a book from beginning to end. I'm certainly definitely want to take a deeper dive into, this book, or even if there's an audio. I'm sure there's an audio book, but and again, even taking that a step further now and thinking about AI, because I had seen another quote, and I have to paraphrase it because I didn't remember it verbatim, but it would be so awesome, and I'm sure these already exist or they're in development, whatever the case may be. But it'd be so amazing if AI was utilized to take care of those more habitual tasks, the day-to-day, that can open us up for, kind of the creative spark that our minds need, as opposed to the other way around, right? A lot of us use, at this point, I don't want to overgeneralize, but there are a lot of AI tools out there to kind of be creative for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's again, not wanting to digress too much, but I think there are so many areas that we can that we could dive into, but I know for the sake of time and for our listeners.
Sure. But to your point, I love that, the idea of how do we utilize AI and identifying and prioritizing specific types of tasks, especially in the framing of what we've talked about here. Yes, I think, and would also be interested in a side combo.
Right. Yeah. Further, more subject matter, I guess, for anybody listening who may be a psych major or wants to take that a little step further. Yeah. Now kind of taking a turn here and going back to your work, Dr. Keeton, and what you've done up to this point, and your last 2 years here at UT Health, which have been, again, great to work with you and to see what we've done as a standalone university, but certainly as a merged institution come September. But taking all of that to the point now and going back to your your entire career thus far, just highlighting a project or a piece within your career that you're most proud of. We'd love to hear more about something specific in that has contributed to. Yeah, I mean, I know there are a lot of examples, but
I don't know about that, but I appreciate that. The one I wanted to share, and I think I chose this example because I think it actually touches on even some of the tech piece when you talk about that AI. When I started in the Center for Professional Excellence in 2016, the Executive MBA program was kind of already set. And at that time, a new executive director, Bruce Rudu, came in, and I was associate director at the time, and it was his idea, so his vision of revamping the Executive MBA. But I want to use that as that example of something that I'm most proud of, because to me it encapsulates the things that I care about when I'm working on a project. That it's bolstered and anchored by a beautiful and amazing vision, like a very exciting and motivating vision. It requires a lot of challenge, like to overcome and to work through, and that it only can be done by working with others in a really collaborative and teamwork, camaraderie, overcoming those challenges kind of way. And that was the Executive MBA. So at the time we were thinking about, so just briefly, the Executive MBA is an every other Saturday program all day. So the individuals that are coming to that program are essentially twice a month for a half a day Friday and all day Saturday, taking those courses for almost 2 years to get their Executive MBA, while often having a family and a full-time job, et cetera. So it's a huge commitment on their end. And this is Bruce, giving credit to him, he saw the future of, even for Executive MBAs and where that competitive market would be in 5-10 years, would be that some component of that program needed to be online, that we needed to transition online. And this is before COVID. So, 2017, 2018, we went through the very arduous process of essentially transitioning 30% of that Executive MBA program into a very engaging virtual experience, following a very specific pedagogical model of teaching the specific concepts prior to the class, and then using that class time for a discussion, examples, connection within the cohort. It was really hard, and it was so much fun. And we launched that new Executive MBA in the fall of 2019. And then COVID hit, which was really difficult. But it was also a beautiful example of a project of seeing how that foresight actually helped buffer and save that program, especially when COVID happened. Because then we were already in a posture that a good portion of that program was in an online format, so that we could continue to do and offer those classes, et cetera. So that's an example of something that I'm really proud of from my work.
Wow. being ahead of the digital wrecking ball that was COVID is
great way to describe
right. I always think of it that way. It's like we were all just hit with this, and I called it a digital wrecking ball because even those of us who were very or I don't even want to include myself in that conversation, but a lot of the population who was is tech savvy, so to speak. I just a lot of us weren't prepared, to transition to 100% in most cases online, whether it was education or community outreach, whatever the case may
Training.
be.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was, wow. So congratulations to all of you on that and being ahead, because you're right. It salvaged the program in a sense that it was already there. It was already prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So
we were already competitive,
wow.
and ready to take on that change. Yeah.
Wow, wow. Hearing about the challenges there that you expressed is again another segue into highlighting, which is my next question, a challenging time either professionally or personally that you've overcome throughout through your career, but in your life as well, whether it was a personal or professional experience that may have been that sticks out. I don't want to necessarily say the most challenging, but a challenging time that you would like to highlight for our listeners to and again, just kind of piggybacking onto the last discussion point, we've experienced a lot of challenges, whether it was through the recent pandemic or otherwise. It'd be great to hear some insight there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thinking and reflecting on this question, in all honesty, the last 2 years of this job have been by far the most rewarding, but also the most challenging experience that I've ever had professionally. Starting in July of 2023 and having the absolute privilege to work for Dr. Henrich until his untimely passing in the following March. What has happened in these 2 years, I've essentially had 4. I will about to be having 4 bosses in less than 2 years that all have amazing leadership abilities but also different styles, and trying to create some stability not only for my team but also as a representative of the Office of the President amidst, I should say, of all this change. And so when I think of challenging, these last 2 years have been that. But it's also a reflection that I know that everybody that's listening, it has been also most likely, if not the most challenging, also a very challenging 2 years. And actually, that's what's helped me continue to move forward, is knowing that we are all in this together and that there is amazing support at every single level within this institution and organization. And, it ties to the things we've talked about earlier. It defines who we are, and usually we learn the most through challenging experiences. But they're not easy.
No, absolutely. I don't have much more time ahead of you in terms of my time here at UT Health. I've been here it was 3 years on July 5th.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Again, I use the word resonates a lot, but a lot of that does resonate with the experiences that we have all had as a UT Health San Antonio community. We certainly have seen a lot, and we're excited about the change that's to come, built on previous visionary leaders such as the late President Henrich, and we are thankful for everything that's been implemented thus far, and are so excited about what's to come. But to your point, I've seen the changes in leadership, of course, over the last year and a half, 2 years. Dr. Keeton, everything you've taken it in stride. It hasn't rattled you one bit from my perspective. It's been great to just see the evolution just within the short period. But now, kind of where we're headed, it is exciting. To your point, it is challenging. There are many challenging steps, but we have a great support system here within our leadership, and
we do.
And of course that includes you, Dr. Keeton. So we are thankful and we're excited.
I appreciate that, and it's a testament to those leaders that have so willingly and graciously and so well led during that time, from Dr. Henrich to Dr. Hromas, now to Dr. Figueroa, and then of course with Dr. Amy. I mean, on the flip side, when I can step back and not be caught up in the inertia of it, what a privilege to work for such amazing leaders during that short time, even amidst all the change.
Absolutely. What our listeners have learned, and just having heard about your background and where you are now, just even within these 2 years of again this at times challenging, but this amazing experience that has been our time at UT Health San Antonio. Asking what your advice would be to someone here at UT Health, or for a soon to be UT, or let me rephrase. What advice would you give a UT Health San Antonio or soon to be UT San Antonio employee interested in pursuing career advancement with the university?
I love this question, and my answer comes very much from my belief in some of the things that we've talked about of what good leaders do and how teams, effective teams, work well together. So the first answer is around cultivating relationships, and I know that gets a lot of traction anyway of, well, what should I do if I'm looking for some kind of career advancement? And people say, well, it's your network. It's going to be about building those relationships. And I think that actually really is true. I can speak to that even just as a testament in my short time. I'm sure you can as well, Pete. Understanding the complexity of an organization like UT Health thrives and dies on knowing people and understanding their connection to the organization and the contribution of their team or function. And so the sooner that you can learn those and build the relationships of the people that are actually doing things within an institution, it's going to benefit you not only from the knowledge of that, but by being visibly connected to those people, and you're going to be in the lane of hearing about job opportunities, right? You're going to be thought of if you're performing well in those certain situations, et cetera. And I also want to say, too, I think when we think about this integration, that's going to be 100-fold, especially when we talk about, this idea of cross-disciplinary partnerships and connections. Dr. Potter, who is leading as SVP for the Office of Research here, and, of course, at UTSA, that's what they're starting with, right? They're looking for these cross-disciplinary interactions and potentials for these researchers. And so it's very much the same when we even think at that granular level of the type of relationships I'm establishing in a professional career. And I think that's where you start when you're thinking about the lens of, I want to advance, I want to have other opportunities. And then the others, I just think, be explicit. Do that in a kind way, do that but do that in a way that is direct and that you can articulate what you are looking for and what you want. I think oftentimes people are invited to share or have opportunities and they miss sharing that type of feedback, and it's really important for their leaders to hear that.
Well, that's great. I think tying that into, of course, where the university is headed. I mean, just myself having started here and seen, I had not worked at an institution of this magnitude, even the UT Health size with I think as of right now nearly 3,000 employees, and then soon to be so many more as a merged institution. Seeing the opportunities there, to your point with cross-pollination, I think just makes so many opportunities available. And to your point, if they're not vocalized when the opportunity comes, it would be, you just don't want to have a missed opportunity. But yeah, we certainly look forward to what's to come, and that's great advice for our community. Picking brains like yours is just so it's so helpful, and we know that a lot of our leadership team and our deans and our professors and everybody here, the directors who have been so open to having these types of dialogues, with people not only within their departments but outside. It's just been such an amazing experience for those of us who, such as myself, who are not involved in a lot of these day-to-day activities. But I think that goes a lot to a lot of us here at UT Health San Antonio, and I think that, of course, that's actually the point of this podcast, is to expose our different departments and our a lot of these different viewpoints to the greater staff community. Yep. So we can see what opportunities would lie for those of us who are looking for advancement, or at least just looking for, oh, wow, it's great to learn about what, XYZ person is doing. I actually didn't know that department did this or that. It's just, so it's great to hear that perspective, and we thank you for emphasizing that more.
For sure, because to your point, the first step is always awareness, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the cultivating of those relationships have to be built on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now for more of a fun question, if you will. What advice would you give the younger you?
You say fun question. Yeah. Of course, I had like some bemoaned quote here about making sure that you're, living in the now, and that, you're not thinking about the future, and like how important every single moment is. But the fun answer, so I'll turn it and not share the kind of sad quote, is I wish even more so. I've always tried to live this way, but just really living intentionally and not sweating the small stuff. Like especially when we get wrapped up in all of this change right now, that the future self of me in 2 weeks or in 2 months or in 2 years is not going to remember that minutia that's creating so much angst when we have to deal with stressful situations, when we're having to deal with change. And so I think if my 20-year-old self or 25-year-old self or 30-year-old self could have appreciated that a little bit more, I think my life satisfaction might have been a little bit better too. But
wow. And even taking your earlier point, not to focus on that too much. At the same time though, because again, that's another point that just personally I've taken to heart, is living in the moment. Not taking away from your earlier statements about career advancement and looking toward the future, but at the same time, ensuring that we appreciate these moments in the here and now, not focusing too much on the past. Of course, giving advice to your younger self. And I guess that's why I framed it as a fun question, because it's like, we've, of course, evolved in the last however many years we want to look back on. But I really did appreciate just your point about being mindful, living in the moment. I think a lot of us have taken that and started to build upon, those types of approaches to life. Especially a lot of us, well, I don't want to even say a lot of us, all of us coming out of this pandemic time frame, and again, not wanting to go back too far into those moments. But I think a lot of us, at the very least myself personally, have really capitalized on trying our best to be in the moment. It resonates so much. So we really do appreciate that.
Love it. I'm glad it's not just me. That's good.
Absolutely. Wow. So this question, it's kind of I don't know. It's interesting because, it's something that I think a lot of us, to your point, we thought about our lives in a different capacity, maybe 20, 30 years ago. So we thought it'd be kind of interesting to just hear about, if you could change anything in your career path, would it be anything? And if it would, what would you be known for if there was anything that you could change in your career?
Yes, I love this question too. I don't like to think of I regret X, Y, or Z. But this framing, when I talk to young students that are thinking about going into industrial organizational psychology, and their first question is, what is that? Their second question is, what else should I be thinking about as I pursue that path, career-wise or professionally? And for me, if I would have done anything differently, it was actually kind of a tie to our earlier conversation around tech and AI. I would have gotten some kind of minor education or skill set or work experience that's actually incorporating that technological capacity with the background of org psych. How our work streams are being influenced by technology. Even this conversation that's made possible. This is going to be a podcast, right? This is a dissemination of information. If I had any wish of doing maybe something a little differently, it would be that I would have put myself in a position to not only have an appreciation, which is what I currently do, but also a knowledge, understanding, and some kind of expertise in that. I think that would have been a really powerful, duo. I think that would have been really beneficial for me. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that's that. Yeah, I think a lot of us. Well, I keep using the term a lot of us. So listeners, if this doesn't resonate with you as much as it resonates with me, I apologize. But I do think that adding those components, and of course it's never too late, because I think about it a lot as well, adding kind of the data analytics, AI,
yes.
those types of components to the daily work that we do, and it's being incorporated into everything these days, that, even certifications or whatever those knowledge capacities may be to build on. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've been there, but now it's just being accelerated so much more with the with
continue to define our culture and our workspace and
absolutely
how we engage and connect and socialize. Yeah.
So again, if there are any psych majors who are working on anything, I'd like to pick
Take
Dr.
that advice.
Yeah.
Yes.
But with all this said, Dr. Keeton, we appreciate your insight into, of course, your current work, your previous background, and of course what's to come with our future merged institution. We thank you for joining us. We, of course, wish you all the best in your upcoming role as Chief of Staff. For the entire institution, we look forward to working with you further, and all that's to come from the President's office. And if there are any closing remarks, we'd love to. Yeah, again, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, likewise. This has been super fun, so I appreciate the time. Thank you, Pete. You did a fantastic job. But also just appreciation to the Staff Advisory Council, the integral part that's played as part of a connection and partnership with the President's office, whether that's an executive committee meeting or even most recently the floods this past weekend. We reached out to the Staff Advisory Council so that we could get information to the individuals that are living in Kerr County that are employees here at UT Health San Antonio. So that partnership is vital and critical. I think it's wonderful that there's mechanisms like this so that the staff can learn and feel engaged. I think they're really important, but I also just am so appreciative for SAC in the first place. So thank you, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Absolutely, and thanks to our listeners. We look forward to, we thank Dr. Keeton today for joining us, and we look forward to our future podcasts and learning more about what we all do here together to make lives better. So we thank you for listening today, and we wish you all the best. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's podcast, brought to you by the Staff Advisory Council in partnership with Marketing and Communications. You can find us on My UT Health or on the Staff Advisory Council's Facebook page. Again, we'd like to thank you for listening and all that you do in contributing to the many missions that make lives better.